aid is based on your parents' financial numbers, and then you have negotiated financial aid, which is based on your process as to what you're doing, and what you're doing as far as the planning goes. So the question often is, why should I complete the Fafsa form? Most schools will require you to complete the Fafsa form in order to assess your possible financial aid. Okay, so most schools will require you to complete the Fafsa form in order to assess your possible financial aid, and you also might have possible future financial need in the future years. And so even if you don't want financial aid, we suggest that you complete the Fafsa form. This year would be a good example. Many parents might not have needed need-based financial aid last year, but this year, because of what happened with COVID and people's jobs are being put on hold and things like that, they might have needed a change. So we suggest that everybody completes the Fafsa form. So what does Fafsa give me when I fill out the Fafsa form? And this is very, very important. I suggest that when you finish doing the Fafsa form, that you look out for your family's EFC number. And your EFC stands for your expected family contribution. This is not how much financial aid that you would get, but this is the amount that you would need to write on your personal check before you can get any need-based financial aid. So look out for the numbers. So many people fill out the Fafsa form, and when we ask for their EFC, then they don't know what their EFC is. So the EFC is made up of 7 different things. It's made up of parent income, parent assets, student income, student assets, the ages of the parents, number of people in the household, and the type of asset that you have. And so that's what the formula is made up of. And then also the type of school. So I'll explain that in a sec. The type of school that you are applying to also determines some of your FAFSA. So what do I need to prep for the FAFSA? I need my tax return for 2019. I need my estimated income for 2020. Balances of any assets, bank accounts, stock accounts, trusts, 529, UTMA and UGMA. Now let me just answer this question of why would I need my estimated income for 2020? Because if it's changed because of COVID, then you might have a case for changing your EFC. And so that's really why you need that. It does not take into account any retirement accounts. And you also need any records of income or assets in the student's name. So these are all things that you need to prep. You also need your latest mortgage statement for your house or any rental properties to be able to complete that. You will need your social security numbers and date of birth for both parents and students. And then the driver's license for your students, driver's license number and expiration date for the students and the parents. You also need the list of schools that you've applied to, and this can be a maximum of 10 schools on the FAFSA form. And then you can go back later on and add, if you have more than 10 schools, you can go back later on and add those schools. So let's just talk a little bit first about the timing of FAFSA, because I know that a lot of people stress about the FAFSA form because the first time that you can complete the FAFSA form is October the 1st. And that's the earliest time that you can apply. So a lot of people stress about the FAFSA form and say, I've got to complete this on October the 1st. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The deadline, the last date that you can fill out the FAFSA form is March 2nd of next year. Just remember also Cal Grant requires submission by your school. Some colleges will require additional financial information such as the CSS profile, and those forms would be would be available. The school will ask you to complete that form and send that to you first. So here's what I would suggest is, in this time where you're trying to get everything done, I would say make sure you prioritize in getting your applications out first and then do the FAFSA form. You can do the FAFSA form now, but remember that get your applications out first, because remember what happens is that once you've completed the FAFSA form, they will send your EFC number to the school. And if the school has not received your application, then they get this EFC number and they say, well, I don't even know who this is for. We don't have an application for this person. So what happens is when the school gets your application, they'll then give your student a student number and they know who it is. And when they get the FAFSA, they can then apply that to the student. So nothing's going to get done at the school with your EFC if they don't have your application first, because they got to know whose application to put that EFC with. So before I complete the FAFSA form, I would suggest that you go to, and I'll give this link at the end again, go to our website, College Planning America, and you can click on Get My Free College Money Report. And what that does is it's kind of like a mock FAFSA form, and will also give you projected financial aid that you might get at the schools that you're applying to based on that. And so it's always a good test, because then you can know what to expect on your FAFSA form. So it determines your EFC estimate and will give you also details of the colleges that you're applying to. And then we'll also give you the ability to compare your EFC once you complete the FAFSA form. So let's take a look at who qualifies to file as an independent. Sometimes I get people who say, well, can my kid file as an independent because then they might get more financial aid? Well, these are the criteria. Were they born before 1998? Are they married or separated but not divorced? Because a married student must report their spouse's financial information on the financial aid application. Are they working on a master's or a doctorate degree? Do they have children of their own, or do they pay for more than half of the child's expenses? Is this person an emancipated minor? Are they currently serving in the armed forces, or are they a veteran? So if your student answered yes to any of these, then they are regarded as independent for federal financial aid purposes. If there's no to any of those, then you have to, the parents are the ones who are going to be filing the FAFSA form. So let me just see here. Okay, we'll get to some of those questions in a sec. Let's talk about who reports as a parent. Sometimes they're mixed families. Sometimes there's divorces and things like that. So it becomes a little technical as to who's completing the FAFSA form. And these are the rules. If the parents are married to each other, then both of them report their financial information on the FAFSA form. If parents live together but are not married, whether that means they never were, they got divorced, they're separated, then it's regarded as if they're married, and both of them will report their financial information. If the parents are not married and do not live together, then the financial information of the parent where the student has lived more than 50% of the past year, or it's a custodial parent where the parent has more than 50% custody, then that parent's financial information is going to be reported on the FAFSA form. If the parents are not married and do not live together, but the student lived with both parents equally, or there's 50-50 custody, then it's the parent who provided the most financial support will report their information. If the custodial parent is remarried, then that step-parent's financial information is also reported as well. So let's say the student is from divorced parents, and she lives with the mom, and the mom has remarried, then it's both the mom and the stepdad's financial information that get reported onto that. If one of the parents is deceased, then their financial information is not reported. If the student lives with legal guardians or foster parents, then it's the financial information, their financial information is not reported. However, the financial support of the student is accounted as income. So in other words, if the student is a legal guardian of the grandparents or somebody else, the grandparents' financial information is not reported. But if there's any kind of financial support coming in, whether it's government support or from somebody else to the student, then that's what's reported. I strongly suggest you consult your college advisor on which schools require non-custodial parent information, as this could make a huge difference, because there's some schools that will come back and ask for non-custodial parent information. All right, so now we know who reports as a parent, and also then what about the CSS profile form? So some of the schools, after you've completed the Fafsa form and after you've sent in your application, will come back and ask you to complete the CSS profile form. And these are needed, certain schools that will require both the Fafsa and the CSS profile form. Many of the private schools use this calculation, and that differs from your Fafsa EFC. So you might have a certain number on your Fafsa EFC, and then when you complete the CSS profile, that number might be different. Typically, most of those schools will take either the higher number of your Fafsa or your CSS profile form. So you can go to College Board and just type in the search for CSS profile, and you can actually see what that is. But most of the colleges who require the CSS profile form will email your student back and ask them to complete that form. And when parents are divorced or separated, colleges may request financial information from both parents, no matter who the custodial parent is, if you're completing the CSS profile form. They'll also take into account the equity in your home, which is not done on the regular EFC, and the two parents could have separate access to the application to complete that. Just remember that for this year also, there's a COVID question added for this year to make adjustments that are not on your 2019 taxes. So our suggestion is that you might not want to answer the COVID question on the application. You might want to send in the application first, because part of what we found is that there's a little more success in going back later on and appealing that because of COVID, rather than putting that on the CSS profile. So let's take a look at what you have to do before you complete the Fafsa form. Both the parent and the student has to get what is called an FSA ID. And you go to fsaid.gov.ed.gov, and you'll find this page, and you can start the process to register for a username and password. This is a separate security step where you go in and you put in your information, your date of birth, your social security number, your address, and everything like that. And then they verify your information and your date of birth and social security number. And so that when you go onto the Fafsa form, you're opening up there with your username and password that you've received from your FSA ID. So it's very important that you go to FSA ID first and register for your FSA ID. So remember, you're going to complete the Fafsa every year. So keep a record of your usernames and passwords and any save keys and any security prompt questions. There will be prompt questions there. What was the name of your first dog? What was the color of your first car? What's your mother's maiden name? Things like that. So make notes of those, because next year you're going to have to complete the Fafsa form again. And if you've forgotten what your username and password is, or if you know the username but you forgot the password, then they'll ask you those prompt questions. And so my suggestion is that you write everything down that you've done, and then also register for email and phone texts, because in order to complete this process, they have to send a text to the phone or an email to the email address, and to verify that that's your email address and your phone. This is very important. This wasn't always the case, but it can take up to 3 days now to verify your Social Security and your FSA ID. So don't think that you can just go in, register for your FSA ID, and then log into Fafsa on your username and password, because it's in most of the cases that I've had up to now, it's taken up to 3 days to register or to verify your Social Security number, both for the student and for the parents. So do that a few days before you want to go and actually complete the Fafsa form. So then where do you go to complete the Fafsa form? You go to this website. You can just type in a Fafsa search, but go to studentaid.edu.gov and you can find the Fafsa there. Now, I always remind people what the first F of Fafsa stands for is that it's the free application for federal student aid. So if you go to any website that is asking you for money to complete the Fafsa form, and sometimes they'll ask you for all your information and it looks like you've completed everything, and then they say, okay, to finalize this now, please put your credit card number in here. Don't do that. Make sure that you go to the correct Fafsa website, and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Once you get to the Fafsa, there's various sections that you're going to fill out. There's a section for your student information, for your parents' information, for the parents' finances. Once you put your finances in, you have the opportunity to upload your taxes. And for this year, you'll be uploading your taxes for 2019, and then also the students' finances. And then right at the end, there's a verification where both the student and the parents need to digitally sign the Fafsa form. So it is pretty simple as you go along. I'm not going to go through each page here. What I am going to do is offer to any of the parents who need help on the Fafsa form. If you've tried this and you've gone in yourself and you got stuck somewhere, I'm going to give my phone number and email at the end, and I'd be very happy to help you through that but I suggest that you go in yourself first and do it. So register for the FSA ID, go and start your Fafsa form, and then if you get stuck, give me a call and I'll help you through it. And basically all you're going to be doing is putting in the student info, the parent info, and then your finances. And that's pretty much where most people get stuck. They say, well, do I do this? Do I do this? In most cases, it's fairly simple. And then once you've uploaded your taxes, remember also, once you upload the taxes, it takes you to a different website where you have to verify your information, and it will upload your taxes. Your taxes are kind of anonymous, so your student doesn't necessarily see your taxes. And then once you've uploaded the taxes, it can take also a few days for that information to get to your Fafsa. And then right at the end, the students and the parents will need to sign. So here's some tips for the Fafsa form. There's no retirement account money that goes onto the Fafsa form. And also remember that after the new tax legislation that was passed, you can use 529 funds for private high school up to $10,000. One of the reasons for that is that your 529 funds, actually any money that you have in your savings account, any money that you have on your in a brokerage account or 529 plans, can reduce the amount of financial aid that you might that might be available to you. And so sometimes we suggest that instead of paying out of your cash for let's say, for instance, Santa Margarita, your fees for there, you might want to take that out of your 529 plan funds. You could do that, but I would suggest that you actually get some advice first as to what would work best for you. Also, work study the work study is registered with the school. So if you receive money from work study there, you can put that down. Also, if the student has money in their bank accounts that they're going to spend anyway. So let's say, for instance, you're going to buy a car for the student, or you're going to buy a laptop for the student anyway, any expenses that you are going to spend anyway. I'm not suggesting that you're going to spend extra money, but if you were going to spend that cash anyway, then maybe you might want to do that before you complete the FAFSA form, because the less cash you have could add to your financial aid. Now, I want to qualify that because it depends on the rest of your information on the FAFSA form as to whether that will make any sense or not. Sometimes people come to me and we run through their personal numbers, and I say to them, look, it doesn't matter what you're going to do with your savings account. Based on the schools that you're applying to, it's not going to increase your need-based financial aid. So don't bother doing all that. I would suggest get some advice on that. Then if you have any special circumstances appeals, sometimes somebody's lost their job recently, somebody's passed away in the family, there might be some special circumstances appeals. Then those appeals should go to the school after you've completed your FAFSA form. There really isn't a place to put that on the FAFSA form, and those appeals need to go to the individual schools afterwards. And very important, before I click submit, there's a place to save that student aid report and print it out. I would suggest you save that first before you actually click submit, so that you can get that verified, take a look and go through all the information. Also make sure you have a copy of your student aid report, so that let's say, for instance, sometimes people submit their FAFSA form, then they give me a call and they've got a question, and I say, well, do you have a copy of your student aid report so I can actually see what you filled out? If they don't have it, it makes it a lot tougher for us. So save a copy of that student aid report that you've got. Also, you've got stuff to compare it for next year when you do that. And then after I click submit, after I've signed it and clicked submit, then note my EFC number. And this comes up right after you've clicked submit. On the page, it will actually tell you what your EFC number is. It doesn't do it in bright sparkling lights and capital letters. So you've kind of got to look for yourself and make sure that you can see what your EFC number is. And then on the institutional methodology school, so then you're going to need to do the CSS profile form, and most schools will send you a link to be able to do that. All right, so we spoke a little bit about the process and the timing. Your application is really what's most important, because without the application, the school won't apply your FAFSA either anyway. Then you do the FAFSA form, and then the school the first thing they will do is obviously make sure that you're registered, and they'll give you a student number. And then very often towards the end of this year, they might actually send you an acceptance letter, some of the schools, and say, okay, great, Johnny's been accepted. And they might give you a number for merit-based financial aid and say, based on his GPA or anything like that. Actually, they won't say that. They'll just say, congratulations, Johnny's been accepted, and we're giving him a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 scholarship. And now remember, in many cases, they might not have seen your EFC or everybody's EFC by then, because you actually have up until March next year to complete the FAFSA form. So that's based on merit-based financial aid and not necessarily need-based financial aid. It's very often only later that the schools will look at the need-based financial aid and your EFC, and then we'll come back to you with a final offer. So anytime a school gives you an offer, what you want to do is, before you just accept or before you just think that that's their final offer, you want to ask them, have you considered the FAFSA form, and is that your final offer? And in many cases, those final offers will only come next year. And most of the public schools, you probably only get those in March next year. Then if you've put together your list correctly and you've got some competing schools in there, then you might have the ability to go and do some negotiation. Now, first of like-for-like schools are the ones that might negotiate against each other. So mostly those are private schools. You might have a USC with a Texas Christian, or a Notre Dame, or a Gonzaga. Those schools might negotiate against each other. None of the UC schools will negotiate against each other, and none of the Cal State schools will negotiate against each other because their money's coming from the same place. And then right at the end, it's going to be stressful. I don't know why so many students wait until the very last day before they actually accept their schools, and that becomes a really stressful time. So that's kind of the process and the timing of everything. So let me just talk a little bit about the parents, and then I'll go back and I'll look at some of these questions. For us parents, so as Krista mentioned, that I'm actually a financial advisor, and so I work with families on their financial plans, their retirement plans, and part of what I do is I look for inefficiencies in your financial plans, which is what led me to adding this college planning perspective to what people do. Because in many cases, people will ignore the rest of their financial plan. So it's kind of like you're trying to fill this bucket for retirement, but there's some holes in the bucket. And so what we want to do is make sure that we can close those holes, because that would make it more efficient for you. So for the same money, you'll end up with more money for retirement and be better prepared for retirement. So as parents, we have 4 major responsibilities. Firstly, I want to say that as parents, most of us would die for our kids. My question always is, should we be doing that? So we want to we're trying to maintain our current lifestyle. Can we just live in the house that we're living in and send our kids to the school they're going to and maintain that current lifestyle? We also want to stay on track for retirement. We want to fund college for our kids, and then also secure our family's future in the case of unexpected circumstances. So if something happens to me, are my wife and kids looked after, and will they be able to continue to live in the same kind of lifestyle that I was hoping for them while I was alive? So a lot of that is asset protection and life insurance and things like that. And that's also a very important part of the planning. I don't want my plans for my family to come crashing down if something happens to me. So here are 10 important things parents need to know about college. My student has these expectations, but I'm not sure if I can afford to send them there. What discussions should I have with my student? So I got a couple of things here that you want to ask yourself. Have you ever discussed between husband and wife who's paying for college? Are we paying for everything, or do we want our student to have some skin in the game? So that's one of the questions that you might want to ask. One of the other questions is, do we have a number in mind as to what we would plan to pay for college or what we can afford to pay for college? And let's get that number on the table and share that with our student, because very often we put our students in a bind because we don't set these expectations for them. And so it's kind of like going out and saying to them, well, you graduated from high school, go out and get yourself a car. And they say, well, what can I get? And you say, whatever you want, go out and get yourself a car, whatever you can qualify for. And so they come back with a Porsche, and we say, well, I didn't mean that you could get a Porsche, you know, and that's because of bad communication from our side as parents. So we need to sit down and work out, what can I afford for college that won't affect my retirement, or that won't make my kids dependent on me later on in life when I have to retire. One of the other important things to know is which school on my list uses the federal methodology and which uses the institutional methodology. So that's because it's possible that I can afford one and not the other because of the change in EFC for those. And so once my student has made a list, then let's check which of those are federal methodology, which of those are institutional methodology. In other words, which one will require the Fafsa and which one will require the Fafsa and the CSS profile form. Do I know the dollar cost of my of the colleges that my student has on their list? Because one college might cost $25,000 for one family and $50,000 for another family, because our financial information is different and my EFC number is different from my neighbor. And so that's part of what we suggested you try and find out. What is the effect on my kids or my spouse of funding college and then running out of money in retirement? And this is where the whole financial planning thing comes in, is that your college planning and your financial planning need to be done in conjunction with each other, because besides our house, college is probably one of the largest expenses that we might ever have, especially if we've got more than one kid. Have I considered the effects of the choices of student one on student two? So if this is my first student going to college, are they going to drain all our savings or all our income for their college? And what's the effect on our kid that's now a sophomore or a junior or a freshman in high school as they come along? I mentioned the new tax law and its effect on college financial planning, and that you have the ability to use some 529 plan money to actually pay for private high school. The other question is, do I have to accept the first offer the school makes, or can I negotiate for a better deal? And the answer to that is, it depends. It depends on the school that you have applied to. It depends on the other competing schools that you've applied to, and will depend on your circumstances. Important thing to know also are the 4 questions that every financial advisor should answer before I choose a college. And there's 4 questions that we need to know and have answers for before we actually choose colleges and decide how much we can spend on colleges. And I'm happy to give those to you later on if you want. What is the one vital question that a school counselor cannot ask a parent? So our school counselors, and especially at Santa Margarita Christian High School, I know that I deal with a number of the private schools in Orange County, and your college department and your counseling department is an excellent department, and the people who work there are excellent people and are doing an excellent job for you guys, much more than any other school that I deal with in Orange County. The one question that they cannot ask, though, is to go to the parent and say, well, how much money do you have, or how much money do you have in your savings account? Because that's not part of the purview of what they do. And which is one of the reasons why Krista and I work together on this, because those are questions that I can ask confidentially as a financial advisor, and to be able to help you to save money on your college. So one of the things you want to do is to make sure that you're bringing those 2 sides together, because otherwise your counseling department is helping your kid put together schools, and those schools might be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and they have no idea whether you can afford that or not. So you want to be able to look at that so that you can actually start some conversations. We're going to finish this off, and I'm going to get to some of the questions. But I'm going to suggest that if you go to our website, the collegeplanningAmerica.com, and you'll see that picture there where it says get your free college money report. My suggestion is that you start this whole FAFSA project right there, because it will ask you some of the questions that you will be asked normally on the FAFSA form, without details and without your social security number and things like that, and will give you a report on. So it will ask you for some of the schools that you're looking at, and will actually give you a report of an estimated your EFC and your CSS profile, the institutional methodology, EFC, and what effect that has on colleges and things like that. And then if you want to have a discussion with me about those, then we can do that too. what we also offer for the folk at Santa Margarita is, if you want to, you can schedule a no-cost 90-minute appointment. We can either do this online, or we can do it over the phone or via Zoom. And you can reach out to us, and we're happy to schedule that appointment with you. It's confidential, and there's no cost to it. And I would be happy to help parents doing that. So let's take a look and see at some of the questions, and I might be able to answer some of these. Okay. Yeah, if the student is applying for early decision, does this impact my deadline for submitting the FAFSA form? Yes. I would suggest then that you do the FAFSA early, but also remember, even if it's early decision, if the college hasn't received the application, then it's pointless doing the FAFSA, or stressing yourself. I don't want to say it's pointless, because if you while your kid is still making their list and doing their applications and things like that, if you want to complete the FAFSA form, you're welcome to do that. But sometimes people are stressed out about doing the FAFSA form, and in reality, it's I don't want you to stress yourself out about doing the FAFSA first before the applications have gone in. If we know we're not going to qualify for financial aid, should we complete the FAFSA form anyway? And my suggestion is yes. I always suggest that you complete the FAFSA form. And many of the schools will not give you even the merit financial aid if you haven't completed the FAFSA form. The other thing is that you never know what's going to come up next year or the year after, and so I always suggest that you complete the FAFSA form so that you've got a starting record. Okay, is it critical to get the number first? No, it's not critical. My suggestion is that you do those so that you know what you're comparing it to, because otherwise you have no idea if maybe, because I've come across this quite a lot, where sometimes parents have completed the FAFSA form and they've made some mistakes on them, and the EFC is just way higher than what it should be, but they've got nothing to compare it to, so they don't even know that they've made a mistake, and they don't even know that they there's a mistake on there, and they're not getting the financial aid that they should. Question here, did you say to use the IRS tax uploading tool for the FAFSA? Yes, I would suggest you use that. Tell me more about negotiating. So remember that the schools will tell you that they don't negotiate, and that's false from our experience. There are many schools that will negotiate. There are many schools that, especially during this COVID time, where actually there's less students applying for college now, because there's many students that are saying, why would I go to college if I'm still going to have to sit in my dorm room, or if I'm sitting at home learning online? Why would I pay that astronomical amount? There's many students now that are actually doing community college or doing online studying at a cheaper place, and are getting some of their basics done before going to college. So some of the colleges are willing to negotiate, and we've had tremendous success with negotiation. But you need to make sure that you've got like-for-like schools or competing schools on there. And in many cases, we would suggest that you even add a school or two on there that your student does not necessarily want to go to, but might get a favorable offer from, because then you can go back and say, hey, Notre Dame, I've been dying to go to your school ever since I was 6 years old, and I'm desperate to go to your school, but I have this other offer from this other school, and I'm dead scared that my parents are going to send me there because they say that Notre Dame is too high. I'm using Notre Dame just as an example, but all the schools would be like that. We've actually had some good results with Notre Dame too. I have a junior in high school and a sophomore in college. Can I start the FAFSA in the spring for my junior? Yes. No, not for your junior. Your junior, your student has to be a senior in high school before you can do the FAFSA form. Your sophomore, obviously you would have completed the FAFSA form already for them when they started there. But for the junior, no, you can only do that after the 1st of October of their senior year. Is there an advantage to submitting the FAFSA early? Does the money run out? I would suggest yes. Once you've sent your application in, there's no reason for you not to do your FAFSA form. I would suggest that you actually do your FAFSA form as soon as possible once you've sent the application in. There really isn't a reason not to do it, other than to make sure you've got an estimate of your number first. But really, that takes you 10-15 minutes to do it on our website, and can give you some information there. So I would suggest do that anyway and do it as quickly as possible. All right. What happens if I decide not to complete the FAFSA by March the 2nd? Can I complete it the following year if circumstances change? Yes, you can. Every year you have the opportunity to complete the FAFSA form. So it's not as if you don't complete it that you won't after that. Okay, Krista, I'm going to invite you to unmute, or if you can unmute yourself, and maybe there's some anything else, or we just going to we can close it up.
This was great. Thank you so much, Dave. If anyone has any questions, they can reach out to Dave. They can reach out to us, and we're happy to help. The process of applying for financial aid is definitely intimidating, and then it gets easier as you go through each year. Also, from an admissions side, when you click on the Common App that you plan on filling out and applying for financial aid, please make sure that you follow through with that. It makes the application seem complete, and that can often be looked at in the sense of they're not sure if you clicked it and if you didn't fill out the information, if you actually are serious about attending that school. Oftentimes too, if something happens this next year, you can't fill out the FAFSA for the second year. Once you're enrolled, they want you to do it as an incoming freshman. We've run into some of those as well. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to help in any way, and so are any of your counselors. So
just one other thing, you guys probably mentioned this anyway, but perceived interest is also a big deal for the schools, and so contact your school counselor, and this is really for acceptance at the school, but contact the school counselor, make sure that you're contacting the school and doing a visit, and you asking some questions so that they know that this person is actively looking to want to come to our school.
Yes, definitely, yes. And also, many people are upset when you fill out the expected family contribution and realize that you may not get very much financial aid, but the CSS profile, as Dave said, adds another layer to it, so you may get more once you fill that out. But secondly, you are a better risk to give and admit to if all of your information is transparent to the school. Each school has a different policy of if they look at your information, how the wait list works, if they're need blind, need aware, or if they know that you can pay the majority of it. It makes for a complete application. So I would highly advise, no matter what end of the spectrum your finances are, that you complete the required documentation to put a to see what happens with financial aid.
I can't stress more strongly that people get complete that report on our website first, so that we can, if there's anything that they can do there, that they can improve their EFC, we can make some suggestions for them. They might also, if they've made any mistakes or anything like that, then we can help them and just give them some advice on that. So please don't hesitate to email or call me. if you're completing the FAFSA form and you say, well, I'm not sure if this should go there or if that should go there, it could make a huge difference to your FAFSA, to your EFC number, if you put it in the wrong place. So feel free to reach out.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great evening.
All right, guys. Thanks very much.